Hey, welcome back to Overhead Athletics. I'm Max Wardell. We're going to talk today about some loaded stretching techniques for the hip flexor, specifically the iliopsoas musculature, as well as stretching duration and prescription of stretching techniques. So we're here today to kind of break down a little bit of a progression that you can utilize to actually improve not only your passive flexibility of the hip flexor, but also your ability to control that range of motion. We know that control of range of motion is equally important to having the ability to move into that range of motion passively. If we don't have the ability to move into it passively, we certainly won't have the ability to move into it actively, but we could equally be in trouble if we don't have a range of motion actively, but we have it passively. And what happens is we end up in that range of motion, we get hit off balance, we slip a little bit. Now we're in a range of motion where we can go really far into that range without any control or dynamic stability. So we have a few different options here for stretching. Now if I just want to do a static stretch, hold this stretch here, I can just tuck my butt under. I let my foot relax, but I actually turn it out a little bit if I want to increase the stretch a little bit. So I keep my hips facing this way, turn my foot out, and you've seen this in one of our other videos. Now I've loaded up that hip flexor muscle in two planes. Now I can actually, because it attaches to the spine, add a side bending away component, or I can add a rotation component of the chest, which is exactly what happens when I throw a baseball, when I have to spike a ball, something like that. So I've loaded it up by rotating the foot out into internal rotation. I'm here, I'm stretching. I can hold this stretch for 2 minutes. 2 minutes is where I like to have athletes go because it gives them enough time in the stretch to improve their range, and then they can start to activate into that range. So what we can do from there is we take a band, step through, back into the stretch. Now this band is actually as high up into my gluteal fold, right under my butt cheek as I can possibly get it. Turn the foot out again. I'm facing the attachment, tucking my butt under so I don't let my low back arch, tuck my butt under. Now I'm holding this stretch. So now I can hold this stretch, and I have a few options here. If I have a little balance point, if I need it, I can try to pull my knee forward isometrically where I'm pulling that back knee forward, tucking my butt under really hard, then relax. It releases. I go a little bit further into the range. This is something I'm always working on. We all have different attributes and different ranges of motion. Some of them need to be improved more than others based on your genetics, based on how you move. And we all kind of need this because we sit in a chair all day long. You're sitting on a bus, you're sitting in your car, you're sitting at a desk, you're sitting in class, and I can do the same techniques to load top down. So I'm loading bottom up through the hip, loading top down, then I can kind of move in this range, feel where I'm most restricted, where I feel the most tension on the front of the hip, sit there, pull my knee forward, then I can contract my butt, contract my glutes, attempt to activate my glute muscles, teach them to control the range, and I'll hang out in there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever I'm feeling that day, but I'm always timing it. I take a phone, I take my stopwatch, I time the amount of duration that I'm in the stretch because most of us think we're in a stretch, and research has shown that if you think you're in a stretch for a certain amount of time, you're in that stretch for drastically less. So if you think you're stretching for a minute, but you're not timing it, you're probably in that stretch for 20, 25 seconds, 30 seconds to develop a neurophysiological response, but we want to sit in there a little bit longer to actually take advantage of some of the viscoelastic properties of the muscle where we're actually elongating it, developing some plastic change. So now I've done static stretching. Now let's talk about loaded stretching. And this is, for a lot of type people, the one way that they can improve their stretching the most or improve their flexibility the most. So what I'm doing, I'm in the same position, tuck my butt under. Now I'm going to try to lift my back knee and extend it without letting my upper body move at all. I hold for a few seconds, down. And as I extend my knee, my hip goes into more extension. But it's got load of my body weight on it. So now And I don't know if you guys can tell, but there's a little shake at the end. If you're not shaking, you might not be doing it right, especially if you're really tight. So you've got this activity to load up that anterior hip with some load in a safe position. I've not extended through my lumbar spine. I've put my lumbar spine in a safe position. I've put my hip in a safe position, and then I'm just lifting up. Weight and gravity are forcing me to activate that hip. So now I have 3 different options based on how I want to stretch that iliopsoas muscle. The front of the hip attaches to the lumbar spine, attaches to the pelvis, and attaches to the femur. And now we can kind of target it through passive lengthening, active lengthening, where I control the range of motion, and then also ultimately more functional loading of the hip while you're at the end of your range of motion to teach that muscle to get strong at the end of the range, but also maintain that range, and then improve it over time. So now I have strength at end range, I have flexibility, mobility, and I have the ability to then utilize that range in the rest of my daily life, in the rest of my activities. So between time at work, whether I'm doing this as part of my workout, the last one's very, very tough, and it can be an exercise in your actual workout. So 3 great options. Give these a try. Let me know how they go in the comment section. If you're this guy or this gal who really has had a lot of difficulty getting flexible, you've probably spent a lot of time on passive stretching techniques. And if we watch how animals move, how kids move, toddlers, they don't have great flexibility just because they sit there in a stretch. They don't do that. They have great flexibility because they use their full range of motion. They express it in a way that their body understands, which means they're loading the muscles in lengthened positions. They're moving through their full range continuously throughout the day. So let's try to do some of that in between different periods of studying, different periods of typing on the computer, or throughout your workout. Let's load up that front of the hip. Let's get a little bit more flexible.